Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the CDBB gathering. I'll very briefly introduce myself. I am a quantity surveyor by profession, and I work in Dublin City Council, and I am also a director of CETA. Our theme today is unlocking innovation to transform industry. And today, this afternoon, we're taking a global view of this, as we have three very interesting international speakers all lined up. So exciting times ahead. Now, please keep your questions coming in, as we have a 25-minute Q&A session in the following these presentations. And it is only by probing and questioning that we learn how to adapt what we hear today to our own particular situations. So our first speaker this afternoon is Ash Curzon. Ash's role is in strategic accounts, design and engineering with Revitsa. And I'll hand it over to Ash. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. So hello, everybody. My name's Ash. As Mary says, I work for Revisto. I look after the strategic accounts across the EMEA region. Just really quickly, for those of you who don't know what Revisto is, we are an integrated collaboration platform. And what that means is we are a platform in which you can host your graphical and non-graphical data, documents throughout the entire construction phases, from conceptual design through to construction, and also after project handover through to facilities management. We are available across the board on pretty much any device, whether it be a workstation or a laptop, a tablet or a mobile phone. And what Revisto allows you to do is to interrogate all manners of information. You can report on that information, and then you can exchange from one single source of truth. So when I first started working in this industry a long time ago, I've worked for varying software companies, from BIM authoring tools all the way through to specification management, and now here at Revisto. And one of the key problems that I was always up against from a consultant's perspective was the desire for people to work where they're comfortable. And when I say that, what I mean is basically, often in a lot of projects, you are mandated to use a piece of software, a file format, or even a drawing format. And a lot of the problems subsided with the fact that people just weren't comfortable moving from one platform to another. So Revisto allows you to work in one platform, but allows you to work where you're comfortable with your BIM authoring tool, whether that be a 2D or 3D, and also not just one piece of software. So whether it be Autodesk or the Nemetschek Group, ArchiCAD, Vectorworks, anything across the board, we can accept it and you can work where you're comfortable. So you can see here, just briefly to go through what level of interoperability we offer. We work with 95% of BIM authoring tools. We support almost 100% of all file types, and we also integrate with a whole host of CDEs, and this is growing sort of on a monthly basis. So if I just jump in straight into my 3D environment, I'm just going to kick off with one scenario here. I'm aware that I've only got sort of 15 minutes, so I'm not going to go through the entire platform, but the way I try to present Revisto is in a scenario basis. So let's say I'm working in on a very large multidisciplinary project, many consultants, and many different types of individuals within each project team. You'll notice up here that I have 2D, 3D, and the issue tracker as tabs. Let's say I'm a project engineer. I'm more comfortable in 2D, so I only want to work in 2D. That's fine. I can jump into my 2D environment. I can go straight through to my drawings, which I've imported straight from my authoring tool. Really, really simple, literally 2 clicks. I can jump into my 2D drawing, and I can interrogate this where I'm really, really comfortable. And the first thing that I've noticed is that Office 138, for example, over here, and this shared space, this breakout space on the right-hand side of my screen as I look at it, should be one area. So there should not be a wall here if I just zoom in. What I would typically do is print this off, maybe, I don't know. I would then redline it, scan it back in, send it in an email, probably have a little bit of context there, explain the situation, send it to the necessary designer or consultant, and they would make the changes. Often those emails get lost. there's very little accountability in sending an email and saying, can you check this, please? And I'd say probably a whole chunk of the team within this project wouldn't know that there was ever an issue yet. Now, that might be a good thing for some instances, but if we were talking about a collaborative environment where everybody can be working on one single source of truth, we ideally want to be working in the same platform at the same time. So where I'm comfortable in 2D, instead of printing this off, I'm just going to do it all digitally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an issue really quickly. I'm just going to give it a title for this instance, design issue. I'm going to do the universal sign for this is an issue. I'm sure everyone's seen that on a drawing. I'm going to give it a little text box here and just say, this wall shouldn't be here. Done. I can adjust that to where I'm comfortable with it. Doesn't have to be a red inlay, it can be any sorts of colors, as you can see. I click done, and that's created the issue for me really quickly. It's already assigned it a numeric ID. It's given it a status. The title I've already filled in. I can give it a priority. This is pretty major. We're on a deadline. I can add that deadline. It can be really harsh and say I need it changed by this Friday. It's been assigned to myself because I created that issue, and this is where the accountability comes to here. Instead of me just sending an email to an individual, what I'm doing is I'm going to assign it to an individual. So I've got a colleague in this instance, let's say Peter. I'm assigning it to Peter, but I also want other people to be able to see this as an issue. So pushing for that collaborative environment that we're all working towards. I know that the rest of the project team needs to be able to see this. So I'm going to add Lewis, I'm going to add James. They will now be able to understand where this issue is. And then I can give it a tag. And these tags, or this metadata, all of this data that I'm adding to this particular issue, I can then report on. So if I come across an individual who doesn't want to use Revisto, doesn't have access to Revisto, I can actually get reports externally out on these issues, and they would never have to use the piece of software if they didn't want to. So I'm just going to add architecture to this just for this instance, and that's it, done. I've created an issue in less than a minute. You'll notice that all of the changes that I've made to this particular issue are noted in this chat functionality in the middle. So I can actually chat to anybody who's watching or has been assigned to this issue and just say, Peter, can you check this? Peter will get a notification either via email or within the Revisto platform. You'll notice up here I've got 67 next to my name, which means I've got 67 open issues, or I've had a busy morning, depending on which way you look at it. And he will get a notification that will take him straight to this particular issue within Revisto, and he can see it exactly how I would intend him to see it. And that's sort of the point that I'm trying to drill down here. I don't have to write a paragraph explaining what sheet this is on, what revision this is involved in, what needs to be changed, when it needs to be changed by. You can imagine trying to fill out all this information in a little paragraph. That could take a while. And also Peter receives an email with a screenshot and doesn't understand which drawing that refers to, which environment that's in, or which revision. So Peter will be able to get straight to that issue and make changes really quickly. So let's say Peter is somewhat more modern than I am and wants to work in 3D. Typically what we've seen in the past is people would then move to a different program or a different environment. They would lose that contextual information and that accountability, and they'd have to start from scratch. Whereas with Revisto, all of our issues, when placing them, whether that be in 2D or 3D, are coordinates based. So they sit on those X, Y, Z coordinates, meaning that I can see this issue in 3D again, if I want to. I probably shouldn't have placed it immediately on the wall, but you can understand that this is where this issue is. And I can also see it in 2D where I originally placed it. But a bit of added value here is the ability to see every other 2D sheet that issue affects. And because it's coordinates based, Revisto understands every other sheet that sits on those coordinates, and we'll see every other drawing where that issue will impact. So there's a little bit of power there compared to your traditional workflow, whatever that may be. So I'm Peter in this scenario. I'm way more comfortable in 3D. So I'm going to jump into my 3D environment, and I can see this really quickly where this impacts. I can zoom in and out and see where else it impacts within the drawing. And I can also go back to my home screen. So given that scenario where I've created it in 2D, I'm more comfortable in 2D, Peter's more comfortable in 3D, he can see that issue without having to create multiple instances of that issue. That's one way of where you can collaborate where you're somewhat more comfortable. Let's go through another scenario here. And let's say that I'm going through my 3D model. I'm comfortable in this environment. This is where I want to be working. So I'm switching to a different individual now for this scenario. And I have been tasked to check all of my doors on this project. For whatever reason, I'm sure we've all been there. I can just search door within my object tree. It'll bring up every element within my model that is consistent with doors. And then I can isolate all of those in transparency. So typically where I've been working in the past, this would be a very, very manual process, probably in their BIM authoring tool, whatever that may be, and could take some time to locate all of the doors within the project. I've just done it in a couple of clicks. I can also see all of the properties within these doors. So I'm checking through them on a one-by-one basis if necessary. All of the properties are brought in through your authoring tool. So all of the information is accessible within here, from geometry to actual data. You'll notice that you can go through each bit by bit, excuse me. And you can also see the Revit type and all of the information from your Revit model. In this instance, I've got a fire rating here. This is a custom property that we've added. So another ability within Revisto to stay where you're comfortable. I've added an additional custom property to it. In this instance, it's the fire rating. And for this particular door, it's 60 minutes. What I can do to interrogate that data a little bit more is create a new search based on that. So I can find all of my 60-minute fire rated doors. So in this instance, it's pretty much every door on here. As my role is to interrogate this, I've noticed that these doors at the front should definitely be 120 minutes. They shouldn't be 60 minutes. So I'm going to create an issue or a task or an activity, whatever you want to call it, that these doors need to be changed to 120-minute doors rather than 60-minute doors. Instead of me going back to 2D, creating the issue the way that I first showed you, I can do it all in 3D via this view, so I don't have to go back to my original view, and I can do it in 3 clicks rather than having to type it out. What we've got here are called stamps. Think of stamps as predefined issues. All the information, all the metadata is already filled in. I've got my fire stopping insulation stamp here. What I'm going to do is click on these doors and place my stamp. So in 2 clicks, 3 clicks, I've created the exactly same level of information with regards to the issue, but I've done it in a couple of clicks. So you can see that it's already been given a priority. It's already been assigned to an individual. It's been given a tag, and the necessary people are watching. And I can go straight back to that issue and see the exact same level of information. So I've created an issue in 2D for somebody who wants to be able to collaborate in a 2D environment. I've created it in 3D for somebody who wants to be able to create it in a 3D environment. And I've also still got my issue tracker open so I can see all of my other issues and all of the critical information on the right-hand side. Even though I created this particular issue in 3D, because of the power of the coordinate system, I can still see it in 2D if I wanted to, and I can still go back to the original 3D view. And what's key here to try and bridge that gap between collaboration and project authoring or your authoring tool is the ability now for me to jump from Revisto straight back into Revit. So I've got my Revit model open here, exactly the same model. I've linked it to Revisto. I'm just going to double click on that issue. It's going to take me straight back to that location in Revit. So I don't have to go looking through it for the right model or the right sheet or the right revision. All I need to do is double click and it takes me to that exact location within my authoring tool from Revit. So that's going to save you. That's going to save you a significant amount of time from being able to find your issues, change those issues, make changes, adapt, and control your model with a little bit more security than hopefully the workflow that you're working on at the moment. So that's the 2D and the 3D environment and how they work together. Let's say, for example, that I wanted to try and combine those two together. So let's go back to my 2D drawing. I'm going to jump straight back into, let's say, my ground floor sheet over here. Let's say that I wanted to combine the 2D and the 3D environment together. You could say that I could open two screens and just look at them side by side. You'd be right. But there's a more powerful tool in Revisto and a more powerful way of doing it in Revisto. And that is our 2D overlay tool. So what we're doing here, or what I'm trying to illustrate here, is that we're combining the power of 2D and the power of 3D together without having to change platforms or to have two screens or anything like that. And because it's just cutting a section between the model, I can actually adapt this 2D drawing, move it up and down, and see other elements within the project that perhaps I wouldn't have been able to see previously. And that works in exactly the same way with all types of drawings. So I've got sections over here. Works exactly the same way. Cuts a section through the building and will display that 2D drawing on that 3D model, giving you more power to be able to interrogate your models in a more intelligent way. And the final thing that I just wanted to touch on before I move on to anything else is that third scenario where perhaps we have an individual who doesn't work within Revisto, doesn't work within their authoring tools, has no desire to look at it from a 3D or a 2D perspective, but does want to understand what's happening in your project. And this is our dashboard, our reporting matrix. This can all be completely customized, and you can actually see what's going on within your project from a high level without looking at the 3D or the 2D information. And this just gives you another option when displaying project information to either your entire team or a client or anything along those lines, someone who's not comfortable or doesn't want to get involved in the 2D or the 3D environments, and they'll be able to understand what's going on in your project without having to do so. And let's say I had to report based on that activity, which I'm sure the majority of you do. That can be automated within Revisto. So if I wanted to report on all manner of my issues, I could send that and schedule that to be sent out on a daily or an hourly, or depending on how stringent you are in your requirements, or a weekly process. And all of the information that you can see within Revisto is displayed in either a PDF or a spreadsheet, depending on where you're more comfortable. And you can get that information in front of the right people at the right time with a couple of clicks. And that was all I really wanted to show you within Revisto. And just to sort of summarize some of the key points that I really wanted to try and drill home is that collaboration should be easier. And in my opinion, the way to do that is to allow people to collaborate in an environment that they're comfortable in, whether that's 2D, 3D, reporting, authoring tools, wherever they're happy, you should be able to collaborate. And I think personally, that Revisto allows you to do that. So that's me. That's my presentation done. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you, CISA, for the invitation to be able to show Revisto. Hopefully, we'll be talking to many of your attendees in the near future.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ash. That was a very interesting actual presentation. This is something that I can see us using a lot in the future, because one of the biggest problems we have is collaboration with people who are non-digitized and are afraid to move out of their comfort zone. And this platform takes care of people at whatever stage they're at, and they can gradually, you know, it'll help them to actually move forward and to embrace BIM at the speed that they're able to go at. So it's a fascinating tool, actually. Now, our next speaker is Alexandra Bolton. Alexandra has spoken for us before in the past and delivered some very, very, very good presentations. And she's Alexandra is an executive director with the Centre of Digital Built Britain, the University of Cambridge. And the title of her presentation is "The Future is Now," which I find fascinating. I'm delighted and excited to hear what the future is.
Brilliant.
So over to you, Alexandra.
Thank you very much, Mary, and I hope I can live up to my billing. Good afternoon, everybody. I work at the Centre for Digital Built Britain, as Mary said, but we're part of the National Digital Twin Programme of Great Britain, and I wanted to speak to you more about that. So the boring title will be Data Infrastructure to Create the Future We Want, but it is "The Future is Now," or how can we be better ancestors? So if you look at all the people who have been on the planet, estimates are in the last 50,000 years, about 1 billion people have lived. Currently, we've got about 7.7 billion on the planet. But if you look at the calculations based on average birth rates from the UN over the next 50,000 years, we're going to have something like 6.7 trillion, and yes, I did mean trillion, people coming after us on the planet. And what we do now will affect the lives that they can live. We are their ancestors. So how can we be better ancestors for these people? In April this year, 75 leaders of the built environment in the UK looked at what they thought their vision for the built environment is. That's not something we have now, but what do they want it to be? And we came up with, we want the built environment to exist. We want it to have the explicit purpose to enable people and nature to flourish together for generations. And we thought that it's only when we shift our focus from creating a built environment, from this big design and build, to looking at the outcomes that it enables, that we will be able to get this balance of people and nature thriving together for the future, for those 6.75 trillion people coming after us. And we know that the built and natural environments are complex and interconnected systems that are essential for our well-being. So improving the outcomes for the people and the nature depends on those systems, but also on the services that those systems provide, and coordinating the built environment as a whole, not as individual parts, individual assets. We need to view it as a system of systems. Why now? There's been so much in the news about COP26, about the climate change disasters in the last year. The built environment is way too big to ignore its part in this. The greatest challenges of our generation are systemic and they're interdependent. So things like climate change, things like global poverty, things like healthcare, systemic and interdependent challenges. And the pandemic itself has emphasized the important realities that we all knew, but perhaps hadn't focused on. Well-being is crucial. Decisions made now have long-term consequences, some of them for millennia. Change can happen incredibly quickly, and we need to get more from less because we can't keep up eating up the planet in the way that we are. So we need to use what we have in a much smarter way. The choices that we make in the built environment last for generations. So if you look at Roman roads, they've been around for millennia, these infrastructure corridors. Civil structures can be around for centuries, so things like Victorian bridges and tunnels or post-war tower blocks. Mechanical components generally around for about decades, so things like lifts, pumping stations, and software can be really quite quick. We can have upgrades within a year or certainly on an annual basis. But the decisions we make, how we create our built environment, how we use it, how we make it work for us, they will last for centuries, if not millennia. The built environment, as I've said, is a system of systems. We have our economic infrastructure, things like transport systems, power systems, factories, manufacturing. We have our social infrastructure, things like hospitals, schools, the houses that we live in. And we have our natural infrastructure, our green spaces, our forests, our rivers, our lakes. All of these come together to create the built environment, the physical built environment in which we all live, work, and operate. But it's the services that connect those built systems, those natural systems that create the outcomes that we desire, and the systems that we use to create those services, to create those outcomes. It's these outcomes that we need to focus on when we're making those decisions as to what we do with our built and natural environments. I've talked about the physical built environment, but all the things that we live in, we work in, we move through, they're creating data. Some of it's captured, a lot of it's captured, some of it's not. But that data can create a cyber version of the physical built environment. And by looking at that data, by using it to inform our decisions, by making sure that we've got the right data in the right hands at the right time and that data is right, we can make better decisions and interventions back to make our built environment work better for us for the outcomes that we want and need. I come from the Centre for Digital Built Britain. So what do I mean when I talk about Digital Built Britain? I mean data. I mean decisions informed by data. I mean making the right decisions. I mean thinking about how do we design our infrastructure and our buildings. Let's think about our data right at the beginning. Before we pick up our mouse or pen, what data do we need? Who do we need to share it with? How do we share it? What decisions are we going to need that data to help us make? We need to think about that before we start the designing. While we're building our asset, we need to think about how do we How do we share the data with the contractors, with the various suppliers, with the supply chain, to make sure that we can use the data in the best way to get the best value out of our build? So better safety, better quality, better production times, and a better product at the end of the day. Generally, we've been reasonably good at this sort of design and build phase, but the operate phase, when we're using our asset, when we're living in it, when we're driving on it, we need to use the data from the design and build phase and the data that we're getting through operating the asset to operate it more effectively, more efficiently, to transform the performance of the built environment and the services it delivers. And we also need to understand about how we can integrate those. I mentioned earlier that we need to look at our built environment as a system of systems, not individual assets. But not only how do we integrate the assets into that system, but how do we use it to improve people's quality of life? Because that's what it's about at the end of the day, the people who live, use and work in our built environment. I'm going to talk a little bit about digital twins because they're a key part to enabling that system of systems. We have our physical asset. I've chosen an F1 car, one of my favorite sports. It exists in the real world. We can touch it. We can make a digital version of it, what we call a digital twin, which is composed of data. And they are twins. They are similar but different. One's physical, one's in the digital. We get data from the physical twin to go into the digital twin. We run simulations, calculations, models to provide interventions back into the real world. And I'm sure those of you who are familiar with F1 will know that they have some fantastic systems that allow us to tweak the speed of these amazing vehicles. We can do exactly the same with our built environment. So we get the insights and decisions from the data to produce real world outcomes based on what we want to happen. I've talked about the physical twin, the digital twin, the data and the interventions. In a physical twin, we're talking about assets, but processes and systems as well. So they're not just things you can touch. They could be things like a financial system, an education system, a healthcare system. And on the digital side, you've got your data, you've got your modeling, you've got your simulations to produce these interventions back into the real world in which we live. Digital twins will deliver better value by making better decisions faster. By knowing what outcomes we want, we can make those decisions and at speed with a digital twin. And they need to be driven by values. And we believe those values to be purpose, trust, and function. How do digital twins work and how do they build up? So this is a single digital twin of a rail carriage. As I've said, you've got your data going into your virtual digital twin and your interventions coming back. But that's just one part of a rail network. Let's consider the whole rail network. Let's consider the signaling. Let's consider the tracks. How much more powerful is it if we can link up these digital twins so that they talk? So we know if there's a problem with the train carriage, we can adjust the points and the signaling to take account of that. Much, much more value out of your digital twins connecting them together. But let's not just stop at one transport mechanism. Let's look at flying, let's look at planes, let's look at airports, let's look at buses and roads and cars. If we can link these together, we've got an ecosystem of connected digital twins in the transport sphere. Again, much more powerful. We know if the train line goes down, we know what buses might be available, what cars will be free, which roads are going to be congested. And let's take that back a step and make an ecosystem of connected digital twins across the nation. So not just looking at the transport system, let's look at the energy systems and the water systems and the health systems and the education systems and get these working as a machine together, separate parts, but of a built environment machine. And this is the ethos behind a national digital twin. Technically, the national digital twin will be founded on an information management framework. We sometimes describe these as the rules of the game. This is the framework to which all data needs to subscribe, or all users of data need to subscribe to be able to share securely and resiliently. We believe this is based on a foundation data model to provide a clear and consistent understanding of what constitutes the world of digital twins. A reference data library, particular set of classes and the properties we want to use to describe our digital twins, and an information architecture, the protocol that will enable the sharing of managed data. But it's not just about the technical thing. We need to make sure we've got a social side to it. And for us, a national digital twin must be driven by values. It must have purpose for the public good delivering genuine public benefit in perpetuity. It must be able to create value, and it must provide insights. It needs to be trustworthy. And there's a tension here between security, quality of data, and openness. We need all three, and we need to get that balance right, but it must be a trustworthy system. And it needs to function. It's got to work. It's a federated model for us, so connected ecosystems of individual digital twins. It's not a monolithic digital twin of everything. It's got to be curated with clear governance, ownership, and regulation. And it needs to evolve. Even in the last 5 years, this area has moved on beyond anything I could have imagined, and it will continue to do so. So we need to make sure that we're open to evolution and that we can adjust as things evolve. Very clearly for me, it is a socio-technical change program. The technical is vital. The information management framework is vital. We need to make sure that the tech is there. But we also need to make sure that people can use this. It's about the values, it's about privacy, it's about ethics, it's about the procurement, it's about the laws that need to go with it, the regulators. All this socio side around it is vital. Without it, no national digital twin or no connected ecosystem of digital twins will work. And we're at risk of having a beautiful, shiny piece of tech that sits on the shelf and nobody uses. But we can actually, if we can get the socio-technical working together, this could be transformational for those generations that I've been speaking about before. The benefits of the national digital twin, they allow us to make better decisions. But why does that matter? Because if we can make better decisions, we can create better outcomes for people, society, and the planet. Benefits to the society include things like better outcomes for customers, taxpayers, bill payers, improved customer satisfaction and experience, and frankly, just nicer places to be and live. Benefits to the economy, it improves national productivity because we have higher performing, more resilient infrastructure operating as a system. There's a huge benefit of working on a large scale. Improved measurement of outcomes so we can see whether we really are making a difference. And better value, better outcome per whole life pound, looking at the whole life of our assets rather than just the design and build CapEx piece. There are numerous benefits to business. We're already seeing new markets, new entrants, new business models, improve efficiency, and it's across the entire value chain of the construction. Investors, owners, suppliers, contractors, consultants. Uncertainty and risk is not good for anybody, and a national digital twin allows us to decrease that and to manage the risk better. But for me, benefits to the environment, given our current scenario, are vital. There's less disruption and less waste in the use and running of the environment, much better opportunity for reuse, better resource efficiency, but a national digital twin is a key enabler of net zero and the circular economy within the built environment. The planet is the ultimate system of systems, and to make this vision a reality, we can do it. We can absolutely do it, but only if we all play our part with energy coordination purpose in making use of the enablers that we have. At this instant, we stand on the edge of this great opportunity. We have a lot of the technology and we have a lot of the will to get this done, but also a great threat. We have climate change. We have floods happening as I speak, and our determination must be to pull together to deliver this future that we want for the planet and our descendants. We need to use data intentionally to make better decisions for better outcomes for our children, for our grandchildren, and for their descendants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Thank you. That was fascinating, actually. It was very fascinating, I must say. It's like looking at history in reverse, and you're really looking at the big picture, the very big picture, and you're looking at like digital in perpetuity. Absolutely fascinating. And it's taught us one thing: we no longer, as citizens, can live in silos. We're now we're a global citizen from here on in, and this is how we must look at things, and that's how you have looked at things. You've shown us the big picture for the next 50 million years. That is the big picture. Now I'm going to hand you over to our final speaker of the day, and this is a lady, Susan Keenliside, and Susan is Senior Program Manager at the House of Commons in Canada, and she has a very interesting presentation. It's Applied Innovation Approach for Digital Transformation at the House of Commons, Canada, and how digital delivery and digital twins are challenging norms in public sector asset lifecycle. And as public sector is one of the biggest clients everywhere, this should be of great interest to all of them. So I'll hand it over to you, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Special thanks to Alan and the team at CETA for the invitation. It's great to be back at this event again, even if it is virtual. I'm going to start just by walking you briefly through some of the context of all the construction work in the parliamentary precinct. The timing of this is a catalyst for our own digital transformation at the House of Commons. So this is Parliament Hill. It's sitting atop of the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe people, overlooking the Ottawa River. It's known as the Triad. The three buildings are in the Gothic Revival style: center block, east block, and west block with the front lawn. Or at least this is what it looked like many moons ago before all the construction rehabilitation work began. So the center block rehabilitation, it's the largest, most complex heritage rehabilitation project ever seen in Canada, and one of the largest in the world. The building itself, over 100 years old, in a major need for seismic upgrade, HVAC, electrical, IT, you name it, including all of the heritage work required to restore a number of damaged assets. Also, to cover the programmatic needs, the space itself isn't big enough any longer. And with the country growing, we already have projections out of when additional members will become part of the House, and additional visitors all the time to Parliament Hill. So what you see in front of the building here is a dig site, blasting rock and trucking out tons and tons and metric tons of rock to build an underground facility called the Parliamentary Welcome Centre. So in the top right corner, I just want you to note that the West Block now has a glass roof covering it. This is the new home of the interim House of Commons chamber. You'll see that the lawn is cut in half. That will all be reinstated when the project is completed. We have to keep in mind that even for such an active construction site, huge volume of trucks coming on site, the West Block remains a functional legislative building. The ministerial vehicles need to circulate. The safety of the site and of the occupants has to be maintained, and that's a high element activity to coordinate with all of the construction work happening. So this is the house in its interim location in the West Block. You can see that the courtyard is covered with a glass roof, with the louvers closed when in broadcast mode. This interim location will house the house for at least 10 years longer, actually, until the center block project is complete and ready for occupation. So the House of Commons is a real property client. It's Public Services and Procurement Canada, otherwise known as Public Works, that provides us with our base building. And they are our leasing agent, whether it's for the Crown-owned or the privately owned facilities. It ends up being a combination of office and special purpose spaces, mostly around 2 million square feet, 25 locations around the city, at least at present time, and the majority being in the downtown core. And to deliver, we have to be in a position of agility to deliver on any requirements from the House and from the members and from our administration supporting that. So agility and swing space, and being able to make changes to our existing accommodations, to finding solutions, to programmatic challenges. We all need a certain level of agility in our portfolio to be able to respond to the needs. So the House of Commons is an asset owner, definitely in terms of asset management. We have the responsibility to own, maintain, and life cycle a high volume of assets, mostly above and beyond base building. So what would be considered part of the legislative or support functions for Parliament to run. There are a significant amount of assets. There is a lot of equipment, mechanical, electrical, IT equipment, security devices, connectivity, cabling, even cafeteria equipment, not even getting into like the transportation fleet, postal services, dry cleaning, printing facility, trades shop, you name it. It's its own mini city, if you will. So many of these assets are considered critical assets to the operations of Parliament and definitely require contingency, redundancy, risk mitigation measures all built in, and all while a high level of coordination of information between the different service areas for the different functions that they do. So on comes digital built environment. Where should this program land? All of those assets tie back to spatial data. So spatial data is at the core of what we do as facilities management. So which room do they sit in, which building, which life cycle information, preventative maintenance, replacement investment, and all of the digital assets that support their life cycles too. So where to put this program? Fortunately, at the House of Commons, it was a pretty straightforward exercise by the fact that we already have a directorate covering both IT and the built environment under one CIO. And within real property, certainly the focus on facilities management also was straightforward. We're fortunate at the House of Commons that FM facilities covers the full life cycle approach already, identifying capital planning, where investments should be made, projects for renewal of office spaces, etc. While carrying on functions of space management and life cycle asset management, many functions and operations. The digital built environment program was very logical to anchor it into this holistic life cycle approach, but that nowhere means it's only our group working on this. Certainly it has a far reach to many service areas that interact with the built environment on a regular basis and have assets to maintain in those spaces. So in a nutshell, this is our strategy, definitely using the KISS principle, described as being two sides of the same coin. So the two sides being project delivery and facilities management or operations, and together forming the asset life cycle. So I know digital twin is a big fad right now. It's all the rage. That's okay. Let's call a spade a spade. The concept makes it easy to communicate with the different stakeholders, for them to see themselves in our framework, to organize our implementation activities and focus areas around the business. It's also how the funding works. So funding is applied to programs of work, and construction projects are separate programs from operations-based programs. So facilities, again, at the House of Commons, is really the two bookends to project delivery. So leading into project delivery and coming out of project delivery, and the digital is reflected in what we expect and how we already to some extent do business within each phase, and to bridge the gap between the two. So one element that is vital is to be able to communicate a clear vision and a clear mission. still along the lines of the KISS principle, not looking to over design things, but our vision of our ideal future state is that we now actually have the ability, and the opportunity to realize a coordinated real-time digital repository of built environment information for the organization. So the mission really becomes, our purpose in our actions, which is to digitally transform our tools and processes in line with industry standards, the project requirements, and our business use cases. So let's talk about use cases for a minute. We're using use cases as a broad term, so not too technical, but as a best practice for implementation because they're very easy to communicate. They're not too prescriptive, don't require over design. And it really allows us to focus on our high priority business needs, the low hanging fruit that's available at the moment in terms of the maturity of the technology and the standards. It gives a clear objective, a clear scope, allows us to put timelines and metrics to that, to project manage it, have the right subject matter experts assigned, the right governance and oversight, and the ability to take small chunks in an agile approach. So whether they're proof of concept or pilot project, or initiatives, this is the way that we're able to not only to show results quickly, but also to work with a select group of folks to upskill, to mentor, to offer just-in-time training, and even to work with the hardware and software requirements at a very pragmatic scale, and then start to show results right away. So at a very high level, I know use cases is a broad topic, and there's lots of literature out there about how best to approach. So hopefully you're not reading too much into this, but certainly our building components and connectivity piece in industry equated to FF&E, so furniture, fixtures, and equipment, is really a key business process for us and for the other parliamentary partners. Then the second one, very broad topic there, but at the moment, how best are we addressing and getting experience on the different integrations that exist or will continue to develop between sort of traditional facilities management software, IWMS, integrated workplace management solutions, or CAFM solutions. We use Archibus, for example, for the time being. DROFIS for data management, lifecycle asset management, and other applications that are being leveraged for different operational tasks. How do those all interact, and where should the data sets lie? Where should we be heading in terms of this digital built environment panacea? And finally, when it comes to existing conditions, certainly a first step in most implementation plans. Model what you got, and how do you want to visualize that? How do you want to serve it up? Who's going to need access for what reason? We've just developed one discrete use case under this high level one to be able to offer virtual tours and a real-time visualization tool to members of parliament during an office selection process. So they can visit a number of offices virtually in a gaming environment without having to come on site. That was a service asked that we be able to do during the pandemic. So I do want to touch on this old Gartner hype cycle. I think I've had this for over 10 years. And I just found it the other day and I thought, oh, that's really interesting because it was a big deal back in the day. And now with the use case approach that we're leveraging, I'm finding that in fact, it's flattening this curve because we have small scopes, agile, we're showing results quickly. So there's not much time to create these inflated expectations and then have the disillusionment. it's really flattening this curve, being able to use the use case approach to implementation. So focusing on BCC and including the unique facility elements, which are the equipment categories shown here. For us, it was a very smart and strategic way forward. Core to our business, these are the assets that we own, that we have the technical authority over during project delivery. And being able to transition that into DROFIS and Revit was a fantastic opportunity, and in line with overall where we wanted to go and knew we needed to go. So for a go forward basis on major Crown projects, this is our new way of doing business for BCC. So we've been able to transform from a library of CAD blocks and quite a complex spreadsheet methodology that did work very well, but able to translate that in a step change to BIM objects in an object type library with DROFIS. So at the end of the day, for the center block functional program, for the House of Commons, taking the 500 individual Word files, so each file is a room data sheet, taking those 500 individual files, now they exist in one structured database. So the team spent upwards of 2 years, getting to know DROFIS, learning and customizing the interface, translating our standards into it through the templates, and having the right subject matter engagement and oversight from senior experts to make sure that what is being developed for Center Block will be the right way forward for our entire portfolio on a go forward basis for all the projects coming down the pike. Just a couple of examples here in terms of working on the object libraries, whether it's in Revit, the level of detail that they should practically be at compared to in a real-time visualization application where you want the realistic and you want to optimize the geometry of those assets. Just a view of our real-time visualization tool. So at the end of the day, we're moving forward on some of our lessons learned. What we have learned has all been excellent, but going forward, we would definitely recommend establishment of a digital delivery office for all of the major Crown projects. This would allow the right subject matter experts to come together around the table. It's definitely a multi-stakeholder environment. So the usual, bi-weekly BIM team meetings, that would be the place for them. The focal point for deliverables like the BIM execution plan or any of the technical specifications around model or data exchanges or deliverables. The ongoing dialogue on how the tools are evolving. Certainly these projects are multi-year projects, long in duration, and the standards and the protocols in line with industry are always evolving. So a digital delivery office would provide that right vehicle and the right focal point for really what's becoming its own discipline, and certainly a central focus for what's coming out of ISO 19650. Keeping in mind, like in our environment, this multi-stakeholder environment, we effectively have a 3-tier client chain. So Public Works is the client to the consultant, the House of Commons is the client to Public Works, and the House of Commons has clients internal, which are the service areas. So 3-tier client chain kind of kiboshes this notion of one owner or one client that is often in the literature. So finally, I'm at this point looking at how to use policy to address change internally, so within the organization, given that many service areas have or interact with or have a need for built environment information in a digital format. Also being public sector, of course, policy is part of public sector life. So the aspect of that also is this notion that digital assets are assets too. They have their own life cycle. You would think they would mimic the life cycle of the physical assets, but I would challenge that argument. So far, you know, technology, the digital assets, they need their own maintenance cycles, they need upgrades, they need TLC. There's a constant evolution in the tools, in the integrations, in the standards being developed, new tools coming into the organization that want to be connected in. So that piece, as well as the framework and structure around the data itself, the authorship, data classification, even managing permissions and viewing, you know, access rights, all of that, you know, technical aspect to the type of collaboration and coordination that we need to achieve for a successful digital built environment outcome. I'm questioning and exploring with the team, how can policy set us up for success in this matter? So final thoughts, I know at the end of the day, it's going to cost us more over time to hang on to old business practices than it will be to just invest and upgrade in line with industry. We've already seen this with how the paper-based BCC process just doesn't lend itself well to the change process within the project. So the House will spend time providing comments back to the consultant, but by the time the comments are received and the amount of time it takes to incorporate them back into the design, the consultants already are on, you know, hitting having to hit their deadline, and unfortunately, in many cases, the clock is just ticking, and the result is that effectively time has been wasted, and we end up not being so satisfied as a client. So with that, I want to say thank you so much. I want to say thank you to CETA and congratulations for putting on such a great event. And I hope everybody stays safe. Take care.
Thank you, Susan. That was a fascinating presentation. Interesting buildings and a very long-term project. Very, very interesting. Now I'll ask if people could please pose their questions and put them into the chat, because as I said, this is where we learn, this is where we have the interesting discussions, and this is where we exchange information. So I'll start with some questions of my own that I have. Now I found that COVID-19, the pandemic, had a major effect on me as a person. Just as a person, I went from office working to e-working. I went, everything was digital. From no matter what it was, it turned out to be digital. So I wondered, and I'd like to ask each and every one of you, what impact it had on each and every one of you. Because for me, it catapulted me into the digital world at a rate of knots. I was so fast. I had to learn quickly. And I wondered how it was for everybody else. So if I could start with you, Alexandra, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you, Mary, I went from being in the office every day to being remote, and my whole team working remotely. So for all of us personally, a big change in how we work and how we think about work. But I also think it's opened up a lot of people's minds. It's allowed us to realize that things that we thought weren't possible, things that we thought we couldn't do or we shouldn't do or would fall apart if we tried to do them, actually we've had to do them. So we've made them work. So we've learned new skills as individuals, we've learned new skills of organizations, but it's broken down a lot of the barriers. And I think in the last 18 months, we've probably managed what we wouldn't have managed in 10 years had we not had the pandemic. It's actually really brought forward the thinking about digital, about what we can do. And everybody from school children to 80-year-olds are now using digital technology. So it really has advanced what we can do and what we can think about doing.
Thank you, Alexandra. I'll ask you, Ash, because yours is very interesting. Yours is collaboration for people who, one of the biggest problems I find is mindset. And the biggest problem I find is collaboration. And, it's for BIM, 80% of the problem is a culture change, and we just don't want to move out of our comfort zone, and we're just afraid. We're literally afraid that we won't catch on fast enough or be able to keep up. So your platform actually is amazing because it brings everybody along. So how have you found it?
I mean, for me personally, I've worked remotely for the last 6 years. Revisto as a business has always been remote. We're actually based in Switzerland as a head office environment. I think that the key is what I've learned over the last 18 months is giving people the right tools makes a massive difference. I know that sounds like a very blanket statement, but a lot of the time we're forced into environments or platforms that we're not comfortable in, and perhaps don't get the best training surrounding it. But if you can at least soften that blow with giving people an environment in which they're comfortable in first and foremost, that tends to make the transition to whatever you're trying to achieve a lot simpler.
Thank you. Now, if I could ask you, Susan, the same question, please.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I could echo what Alexandra and Ash both have just said. A lot of pros and cons when you're talking about productivity, productivity gains for sure, but social aspects, less appealing. But at the end of the day, at least from my vantage point where I am, 3 big lessons learned. One is that the organization was able to change on a dime. They were able to be agile to get the actual platforms in place for the online collaboration to go forward. Second was the realization at the executive level that, hey, this stuff works. Our people are being productive. They're even more productive. Like, their minds were blown. They came forward and said, you know what, we finally believe that working remotely is productive, which was a great culture shift. And finally, it was bringing to light the work done within real property and related to the built environment that often goes under the radar in an organization like ourselves. We're often behind the scenes, making sure all of the accommodations are met, lining up all the construction projects while the main business of the organization carries forward. So it really helped to bring to light a lot of the design strategies, the investment strategies that were in place even before the pandemic. But the pandemic has helped give exposure to a lot of those principles for a healthy and a safe working environment.
Susan, could I follow on with another question? How did you upskill your people? Like, how could you upskill them, particularly in a pandemic, but also the fact is you needed to upskill so many people, and you were doing something that was innovative. How did you do it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's always a balancing act of how best to do that, which services, which sources to use, how to organize, how to stay on track. We made sure that we had a clear scope of work, a clear mission in that, so everybody understood where we were trying to get to. Then we worked in very small groups, not a lot of one-on-one and a lot of mentoring, coupled with just-in-time training. So to prepare for that, there was a lot of investment in building up, the object libraries, the templates, any training materials ahead of time. Then we would engage with the group, get their involvement. So as subject matter experts, they need to own the processes. They need to own the subject matter expertise that's being delivered through that. And then being able to support them and be there through that journey, and allowing them to take ownership of that training, of that upskilling, really was key to that success.
Thank you, Susan. Now here's a question for Alexandra, and please keep your questions coming in. It says, hi, Alexandra, I'm a big F1 fan also. And the question is, are Centre of Digital Built Britain looking at other industry learnings?
Yes, absolutely is the answer, Mary, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. And there's been some fantastic work out there. So, you know, for the last 20, maybe even 30 years in aerospace, in aeronautical, in automotive, in manufacturing, digital twins and digital transformation has been happening. And the really interesting thing is when we discuss with them, they're also looking at us because we're starting afresh with current technology, whereas they were starting with the technology from 20, 30 years ago. So absolutely looking at what they're doing, but also working with health, defense, finance, because they're doing very similar things. And the basic tenets of the underlying fundamental principles are the same across all sectors. So absolutely, although we're set up to look at built environment, if you were to look, for example, at our digital twin hub, you'll find communities in many different sectors and then sharing learnings across those sectors, because that's the way we'll get the best value. And I'm a big believer in making the mistake once and then everybody can learn from it.
Thank you, Alexandra. Question for you, Ash. Ash, you mentioned you had a dashboard for the uninitiated, in other words, for the management, or people who do not really understand construction, don't want to know about it and don't want to hear about it. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works and how it works for people like, you know, what can we find? What information can we find quickly at our fingertips?
Okay, yeah, of course. So collaboration is all about activity and how you then go about illustrating that activity. And some people prefer it in a graphical interface, some people prefer it from a data perspective. The dashboard element of Revisto allows you to do exactly that. And you can report on pretty much any element within your Revisto project. Obviously, we surround it around our issues or activities, whatever you want to call them. But there's varying ways in which you can illustrate that information via reporting, via the dashboard. So if you think of the likes of Power BI, being able to manipulate that information and display it in different ways. The dashboard lends itself very much to that attribute. And it's key really to be able to get that information out of Revisto. We fully understand that not everybody's going to be using it, either from a budgeting perspective or they're just not interested in using that level of 3D platform or 2D platform, whichever way you look at it. But the key is being able to get that information out. And we try and offer multiple ways in which to do so. So just to sort of summarize, all of the information that is retained within Revisto can be reported on and can be illustrated within that dashboard. So it's a really simple process to be able to display that how you want to see it.
Thank you, Ash. Now, this is a question that we've had come in for Susan, but I want to ask another question after this question. And it's, how is the Canadian government supporting construction SMEs in their digital journey? But then I want to follow that up with the question is, Susan, are you collaborating with other public sectors within Canada?
Yeah, those are both really good questions. I'm not sure I'm able to answer the Canadian government question per se. I think there's a lot of good things in the works. We definitely see Quebec provincial government, as well as in the past Alberta provincial government, now Ontario and to some extent BC coming on board at really driving that for Canada at the provincial level. At the national level, certainly Public Works is a main focal point, but they are not the only department that has impact or a role in the built environment or in innovation. That said, I think in Canada in general, all of those entities are benefiting from a couple of national level groups that really have a lot of influence, bringing together the associations, other user groups, other owner representatives, not just government. And that's through the Building Smart Canada chapter and also another national group, CanBIM. So it's through these groups as well that have a role to bring all of the players together. I think at the government level, the general consensus is to understand where industry is at, and industry is kind of waiting to see what government's going to do. So it's a bit of a vicious circle there.
Thank you. A question for Alexandra. Alexandra, what does the future hold for Centre of Digital Build Britain? What can we expect coming out of it very soon? Like, you've given us a flavour for the future, and it is fascinating. The next 50 million years. So, what for the next 5 years?
So So we are looking at some more work on the information management framework as part of the National Digital Twin Programme. For COP26, we are putting together a climate resilience demonstrator, which we're calling Credo, and that's working with UK Power Networks, BT, and Anglian Water to see how can we use digital twins to make the east of England more resilient against climate change. So that's going to be coming out soon. A whole host of papers speaking to the future about what does a national digital twin need to look like? How do we do that collaboratively? You know, balancing industry and academia, balancing socio and technical. So there'll be a heap of papers coming out there. And then, of course, the ongoing support for the UK's BIM programme and the interoperability programme to make sure that we can really get BIM adopted by industry and handed over to industry as it needs to be.
Thank you, Alexandra. Question now for Susan. Susan, given that this project has been a long-term project, can you tell us what are the lessons learned, and for going forward, what changes would you make going forward?
You're referring to the Centre Block project, or
yes.
the overall long-term vision and plan?
Correct, yes. Because there's a lot of years, a lot of trial, a lot of error, a lot of decisions.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's been a huge amount of learnings to put into the next phase, and the next phase it will just keep evolving.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So Mary, you touch on a good point. Standard practice in our organization and in any of the project deliveries is to always track your lessons learned. And we have that now in our department as a repository of lessons learned. We check before going into another project. I think the lessons learned kind of depend on your role in that. I mentioned that we are one of many stakeholders to do with projects like that. At the end of the day, I think as long as we're able to collaborate and we're able to get to know what each other needs to achieve, technology can help with that. It's not the only factor, though. Certainly being able to have the processes in place and the focal points to be able to action on some of these lessons learned, hopefully we'll continue to make progress by how we're applying and digitally transforming towards a better future for, given that we're publicly funded.
Thank you. Now you spoke about multi-stakeholder environment, that there was a huge amount of stakeholders. How did you manage to bring them all together and get consensus? How did you get them all singing out the same hymn sheet?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're a parliamentary partner. There are a number of parliamentary partners at the table. We all represent the requirements to Public Works, and Public Works tenders that and procures that from industry. There are there's definitely a strong focus on good project management framework. But as we know, moving into this brave new world, digital built environment, building information modeling, real-time collaboration in shared environments, that's shaking the tree a bit. That's causing a little bit of a having to puzzle through ownership and access and accessibility and transparency. So I really see a huge opportunity going forward, as long as we can keep the fear factor at bay and manage expectations. But certainly in this shared collaborative digital space, I think what we're seeing is it actually helps to clarify the boundaries of who's doing what when, of the roles and responsibilities. And that's key, to have that but greater clarity, even if you feel scared for all being around the same table, the fact that you can see who's responsible for what, I think will go a long way to drive home the benefits to this digital transformation.
Thank you, Susan. Now, question for Ash. Ash, you have a very good collaboration tool. Does it cater for data analytics and, again, lessons learned and to feed back into things? Does it cater for any of that kind of thing? Absolutely,
yeah. So from a feedback perspective, being able to get all of the information surrounding your issues out of Revisto can contribute to whatever procedure you have for lessons learned, because it's data at the end of the day. How you interpret that and how you analyze it is entirely up to you. And also within Revisto, there isn't the ability to delete issues or activities. So they go from open to in progress to closed, but they still stay in that environment. And because it's coordinates based in the same way, without getting into too much technical element of it, if you replace your model with a new revision or any of those sheets with a new revision, those issues stay exactly in the same place. So we have the ability to analyze the first element of data and the last element of data that you put into Revisto throughout the entire project lifecycle. And what we've seen is that we now have customers and clients that are using it past the project handover stage and actually throughout the entire project lifecycle. So moving into facilities management, being able to analyze the information that's within the Revisto model. So yeah, we try and give as many options to users as to how they want to utilize that data, but it's never deleted and it can always be looked back on.
Thank you, Ash. A question for Alexandra. Alexandra, you talk about data and everything is about data. But I was wondering, since it is all public sector data, basically, do you have a repository? Is this open data, and can this be used by other people, like, for example, academic research, or just for, you know, for entrepreneurs, or where is it housed, and is it open?
So we at CDBB, we don't own the data. It's not, we don't own it, we don't hold it, we often don't see it. In fact, very rarely do we see it. It's owned by those generating the data. Our part in that is the facilitation of being able to share it. And some of our government, so for example, I live in Cambridge and the local council here makes all its data open, except for that's sensitive, obviously. And a lot of UK government councils and central government have that way of handling their data. They feel that it's part of their public duty is to make data available so that people can use it. But is there a central repository? No, and then any national digital twin wouldn't be that the data would sit with the individual data owners. It's just it would be able to be shared in a secure and resilient fashion.
Thank you, thank you. Now, another question. I was wondering about the data again. Like, you research, you know, are you looking at, say, very futuristic research, like, I mean, advanced robots and things like that?
So within CDBB, no. Within the UK, absolutely. So we see connected digital twins as part of what we would call a cyber physical fabric, and that includes exactly that, things like smart machines, advanced robots, AI, Internet of Things. It's all part of a much bigger connected picture, which people are starting to call the metaverse, I believe. I quite like that as a cool phrase. So yes, it's part of that bigger picture. It's not something that we're as a group looking at, but it very much connects, and we're having conversations with those that are.
So would you be having international conversations, like global conversations with other universities and all over the place?
Mostly we're looking within the UK, just because we've got enough in our day jobs, and this is sort of extra on top, working with the UK capability. But my colleagues from the UK are having those international conversations. So yes, we're aware that, again, this is something that is much better if we do it as a group, as a team, as a planet, than in silos, because it will work better if we all have the same basic premise that we're working towards.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. It's been a pleasure actually talking to all of you, and they've been very, very interesting presentations. And thank you, each and every one of you, for coming here and for presenting. And we've gone away with a head full of energy and a head full of stuff to think about, with a real buzz, I have to say, particularly with the future of all this going on. So it's very exciting. We're in a very exciting time. So at this stage now, I'm going to hand you over to Alan, who will do the closing out. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Ash. And thank you, Susan. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Ash, Alexandra, Susan, and Mary, for doing a super job. It might all look like it's serene and everything's running smoothly, but it's anything but. So we've had a great day. We've heard from 19 speakers. We've had 5 excellent chairs. So thank you, Claire, John, Barry, Pat, and Mary, for your help in navigating today. So today was about unlocking, I suppose, the innovation and transformation in our sector. We heard about platformization, we heard about industrialization, we've heard about digitalization, modern methods of construction, innovative procurement methods, new technologies. And so I hope you've all learned more about construction innovations for future generations. And I just want to take a few minutes just thanking the speakers, the keynotes. We're very privileged to have Thomas Bach with us today. I mean, people don't realize this guy is just complete world class. I mean, you think of the experience he has, the knowledge he has, the clients he's worked with, the cities he's worked with, the buildings he's worked on, the iconic buildings, the iconic architects and engineers he's worked with. Very special person to have with us. May, I think he did a fantastic job on the masterclass, on the legal masterclass. Just unpacked everything for us, made things simple. Stephen and Colin, former student of mine, fantastic business insight. You know, very honest approach. Great to see Colin Construction. Great to see more companies like Colin speaking at events like this. We know all the tier 1 companies doing this. Let's hear more about them. Tom Noctor, fantastic. And to have Elliot on your side as well, talking about, you know, your company being a partner, not a vendor. Thank you also to Ash. I missed your presentation because I was trying to get online. We had the internet went down in the college today, which is a little bit concerning. Alexandra, always great to see you. I love the digital twin. I'm a huge fan of F1. And but you know, let's keep in touch and looking forward to working with you guys closer on the Build Digital project. Susan, again, a great insight into what's happening in Canada, and let's keep the connections going there. Any of you that were around this morning at 8:45 might have missed a very special presentation by Alain Waha. Absolutely unbelievable what's happening in the world of platformization and the whole UK approach to 2030, and the fact that we are moving towards a new industrialized future. It was so fascinating that we actually spoke for half an hour offline about it as a panel. We weren't even live. So listen, really great. So many people to thank to today. You know, we'd over 25 or so organizations from universities, north and south, companies, architects, engineering companies, IT vendors, clients. Really, really fantastic. I want to just pick up 2 points that I learned today. And I'm going to call the first one my big top 10 points to take away from today. And they came from a slide from Pat Kerwin. So number 1, we need new procurement methods. Number 2, we need increased collaboration. 3, less adversarialism. 4, we need to pre-manufacture to create more value. 5, we need cohesive government policies. 6, transition to digital workflows. 8, more training, upskilling. 9, incentives to supply chains, particularly SMEs. And the big one of all, we need to think sustainably. Think about the golden triangle: sustainability, economics, society. This is the big picture. So thank you for Pat for that. He also left a saying from Peter Drucker: the greatest danger in times of turbulence is to act with yesterday's logic. It's so hard to keep up with everything that's happening. And, you know, Claire Penny said it yesterday. We've got to work together. Let's not create any more silos here. So tomorrow is about people. This is the navigation today. And actually, Mary, great question you asked about people. How did Alexandra, how did Susan, how did Ash deal with this? How did you deal with it? I had my own struggles as well. But tomorrow is about people. So I think if you could come tomorrow, it'll all stitch together for you. It's been a fantastic day. It's been a stressful day with internet issues and things going on. And but I just love the experience, and I'd love to be in person with a lot of you, that's maybe the next time we'll do that. But I hope you all enjoyed it. Tell everyone about the gathering. This is important, you know, that Ireland have a gathering, Ireland have an alliance, and we need to get behind it. So thank you, stay safe, and take care. We'll see you all tomorrow. And thank you, Elaine, and thank you, Susan and Shannon and Alinea, for all the work in the background.